Talk a bit about why, in your experience and in your belief system, why fasting is so beneficial for people. And if somebody wants to try intermittent fasting, like what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, I think the biggest reason it's beneficial for people is it's beneficial for the people that are very black and white, on or off type mentality, which definitely describes me. So for people that are hard charging, very focused people, it works tremendously well because they can just flip a switch, say, hey, I'm not eating. This might be a struggle. This might be a little bit difficult. Then I flip a switch and I have some flexibility. Like for me, I lost the first 50 pounds because of that. It was a more flexible intermittent fasting approach where I was simply restricting the time that I ate, and I still didn't change my diet all that much, but the weight just fell off because I could suffer and I could grit my teeth through a little bit of it. And I know some people will say, oh, that sounds like eating disorder territory. I disagree. I think if you have a propensity for eating disorder, then maybe you want to be cautious, but you also need to understand that like it's also risky to be very overweight. So for me, being able to say, hey, I'm just going to turn this off and then I can turn it back on, close that door, open that door. It worked so unbelievably well. So I think and also people just get this really good mental clarity that comes from it. And that was a big aspect for me. Like that's why I still fast to this day is I just feel mentally clear, when I do it. So I feel like, if people are wanting to engage in it, I think they need to make sure that they, don't overthink it. I'm guilty of putting a lot of content out there that makes it messy and makes it complex, but that's also for the more advanced people that are progressing. It's very simple in nature. Don't overthink it. Give yourself an eating period that works for you, that works for your schedule. Give yourself a fasting period that makes you feel the best. Make sure you're hydrated. Make sure you get enough protein. Make sure you're working out, and you're going to be fine.
Yeah, I love it, right? Because I think the majority of the people they overcomplicate fasting, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this mean I need to fast for like 3 days? Does this mean that I can't have water? Does this mean I can't do this?" And it's like, no, you just have to fast. Pick your window that works for you. Make sure you're eating enough protein. Make sure you're getting enough calories. Because I think that's the other thing too. Is like I'd love for you to touch on this. Is a lot of people they think when they fast they don't have to worry as much about calories, right? Because they are quote unquote fasting. I would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously calories are still very important, and it's very easy to, when you go into a fasting period or when you go into your eating period rather, to simply not eat enough, right? And next thing you know, you're just restricting calories so aggressively that you have this pretty big slowdown in your metabolic rate. And that's going to make it very hard to lose weight because how do you get past that? You have to restrict calories more, right? So one of the things that I tell people when they first start fasting is say, do your very best to like keep your calories somewhat close to where you were before. And if it feels like you're stuffing your face, then you probably are. So don't stuff your face. So if people like think, okay, let me look at how many calories I eat in a regular day, and let me try to eat that same amount on a fasting day where I have a compressed eating period. Most of the time they will tell you they can't eat that much, right? It's most of the time they'll tell you like, oh no, I'm full, which is a very clear indicator that, okay, well, people are having success because yes, they're eating less. But in the few occasions where people have consistently eaten the same amount, they still seem to lose weight. And why that is, I mean, there's a million different potential reasons. Nothing that I could outright say like, hey, make a solid claim and say, hey, person A does simply counts calories, person B eats the same amount of calories, but in a fasting state, will person B lose more weight? There are circumstances where that happens, but I think there's a lot of different things at play. There's insulin dynamics at play. There's AMPK. There's all kinds of different systems and processes that are making things different for one person than another. So the bottom line is that if you just restrict calories too much, whether you are fasting or not, your body is going to adjust to that. And you need to make sure that you are eating enough calories, whether it's on your eating period or on your non-fasting days. So some of the tips that I give people, look at your calories over the course of 7 days versus every day. Because if you're fasting, you can probably accept that you're going to eat less. So maybe you make up for it a little bit on your non-fasting days. Also, don't fast every single day because then it just becomes normal. Try to let fasting be the anomaly and the shock to your body so that you occasionally get that power out of it. If you're fasting 16 hours every single day, your body doesn't really see that as fasting anymore. It just sees it as status quo.
Right. But do you think that people can get benefit from, like, say, having a 12-hour eating window most days of the week, and then maybe a couple days they shift it into the 16-hour fast?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think, that's generally my rule, like 12 hours is kind of what I follow every day. I don't really consider that fasting. I consider that a healthy pattern. I feel like we need to give our body a little bit of a break. I feel like 12 hours is a great number where it's not hyper aggressive. And I feel like that's a good baseline for people. And there's benefits to that 12 hours too. There's still benefits when it comes down to insulin sensitivity. There's still benefits when it comes down to caloric restriction. There's still benefits when it comes down to sleep, simply by cutting out food a little bit earlier. So there's all kinds of benefits that come from that. And then you occasionally have the days where you push it a little bit longer with like a 16 or an 18. And that way, those are your longer fasting days. So 12 hours is just a tremendous baseline. Stop eating at 7 p.m., open it back up at 7 a.m., something simple like that.
What about working out while fasted? I know that sometimes can be a roadblock for people because they're just so convinced that they have to eat something before they exercise.
Yeah, and it's an understandable concern, because we've been conditioned to think that like we have to eat to provide fuel for our body, and we don't necessarily stop and think about the onboard fuel that we have, and that our bodies are very well accustomed to using our onboard fuel. They do it all the time. They do it in between meals. If we're eating at 7 a.m. and then we don't eat again until 2 p.m., there's not food in your system anymore. You're tapping into whatever you had stored. Our bodies can do it just fine. I think there's a lot of psychosomatic psyching people out there. I think they psych themselves out where they just really convince themselves that they're not going to perform without fuel. So they don't perform because they've convinced themselves it's just going to be that way. I'm guilty of that in the opposite way, where like I train fasted so much that I don't feel that good when I eat food. So now when I eat food and then I work out, I feel like, and I know that a lot of that's psychological because I've kind of conditioned myself to feel that way. It just goes to show that like there's two sides to that coin. So no, you're not going to just break down muscle. It's very important to actually work out while you're fasting, because that's kind of sending a reminder to your body that this muscle is important to maintain and that you shouldn't burn it up. It's not like your body, electively just starts tearing down muscle fiber as soon as you work out. That's not how it works. Like it doesn't just break down muscle. We're not that pathetic. Let's put it that way. Like our bodies are pretty well designed to prevent that from happening, because otherwise, from a survival aspect, every time we'd run out of food, our body would just break down muscle and we'd eventually just die, because especially ancestrally, like we probably went extended periods of time without food. So if that was the way that our body standard operating, no, we wouldn't survive. We never would have survived as a species. So as long as you are keeping tension on the muscle and you're moving your body and you're not just laying on your butt fasting all day, like you're going to maintain muscle just fine.
Some great points there. And I think I would also remind people that before they're doing a fasted workout to make sure that they're staying hydrated with water. I found that's always been something that's been important for me and other people that I know when they're doing like a hard workout.